Well, we begin today's show in Texas at the Del Rio border crossing with Mexico, where thousands of Haitian migrants have set up a makeshift camp under the Del Rio International Bridge, including families with children who hope to seek asylum in the United States. Del Rio is about halfway between El Paso in the west and the Rio Grande Valley to the southeast, and a 3-hour drive from Laredo. At one point Saturday, there were reportedly more than 15,000 asylum seekers under the bridge. This is a 38-year-old Haitian migrant named Richardson, describing the need to bring food and other supplies from the Mexican side of the border back to the camp.
We are having a hard time. Our family sends us money, but we can't eat. We have children but don't have nappies. Look, now I have to cross to the Mexican side with wet money to be able to buy things for the child, and we have nothing. We are unable to eat. I need help with everything that's happening to us over there on the U.S. side, because there are a lot of children, and they are only removing the single parents, and the children are left alone. Just imagine. The children and pregnant women are the only ones left with possibilities, and they are separating the pregnant women on one side, but the children are being left on the floor. Just imagine. I have to go and buy food for the children.
This comes as the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has vowed to accelerate deportations to Haiti. On Sunday alone, the U.S. sent 3 deportation flights to Haiti, each carrying at least 145 asylum seekers, and several more are expected in the coming days. Last week, the Biden administration appealed a court order to stop using the COVID-19 pandemic as justification for expelling asylum-seeking families. This is U.S. Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz speaking Sunday in Del Rio after hundreds of agents shut down the border crossing.
Our expectation is to have up to 3,000 migrants transferred out from underneath the bridge to our processing facilities or to a flight line within the next 24 hours.
Immigrant justice advocates are blasting what could be one of the largest mass deportations of asylum seekers in decades. Rights groups are also denouncing the U.S. government's ongoing attempts to block Haitian asylum seekers from applying for refugee status, which is a violation of international law. This is a Haitian asylum seeker in Del Rio.
I don't want to be deported. If I'm deported now, I'll die in Haiti. Why? Because there's no security in Haiti. They are bandits. There's a civil war every day. Civil war with the police, with bandits, police civil war. Very complicated because there's no leadership in Haiti. There's nothing.
Haiti is still recovering from a devastating earthquake in August and a presidential assassination in July. We begin with Jacqueline Charles, the Haiti and Caribbean correspondent at the Miami Herald. Welcome back to Democracy Now! You're in Del Rio right now, usually covering what's happening just on the island, but you are right here because so many thousands of Haitian asylum seekers are in Del Rio. Can you talk about what you've learned? What is the journey they are taking? And how are they being dealt with in Del Rio? I mean, the head of Border Patrol, Raul Ortiz, is actually from that area, the Del Rio area.
Well, one of the problems is that the media, we are not being given any access whatsoever to this encampment. As you mentioned, the bridge has been closed. Even on the Mexico side, I went to Ciudad Acuña a few days ago. You cannot access this bridge. So we don't know what is happening. What I've been told by some advocates that are here is that the way the process works is that when they move over, when they move through the Rio Grande, for instance, there's an area where they have not yet presented themselves to Border Patrol. And then once they present to Border Patrol, they have this number that they're given. So, for instance, yesterday I spoke to a migrant who was there for 6 days, and his number was 2,200 and something. And that's when you hear they talk about being detained or being jailed or not being able to get access to food. These are reports that we're hearing, and there's mixed reports. Some migrants said that they did have access to food. Others say they don't. I saw migrants on the Mexican side leaving in order to go get food and to bring food back into camp. And even when we went on the Mexican side, I went to a dam, which is a crossing in the Rio Grande. I actually walked through the Rio Grande and walked over to the U.S. side, but we were not allowed to advance, even though we were journalists. So this is a huge issue, the lack of transparency around this, not just in terms of the processing and how they're deciding, you know, maybe who they may let in or versus who they're sending. But what we've been told, and I've been told by the Haitian government, is that they have been told to brace themselves. They are to receive at least 14,000, you know, and that's a huge numbers. And so yesterday there were 3 flights, and you're going to start to see 3 flights a day, maybe even more. There were children, there were families that showed back up yesterday. So this is difficult. And when you talk to these migrants, unfortunately, there are a lot of rumors that are motivating them. So the journey begins in Chile, or you could say that the journey began in Haiti after 2010. You have a large number of Haitians who ended up in Chile, Brazil. I did a story a few years ago. I traveled to Chile. In 1 year, that country received 1% of Haiti's population. 100,000 Haitians migrated to Chile in a year. But life is very difficult for these Haitians there. They would like to remain in these countries, but they can't. It's very difficult. So they take this journey. It's sometimes, for some, it's a couple of weeks. For some, it's a couple of months, 4 months, through the Darien Gap, which is the jungles of South America. It's very dangerous. Some people don't even survive it. They spend thousands of dollars, and we're talking about 4,000, 5,000, 7,000. They sell whatever they have, and they end up in Mexico. What they're telling us is that life in Mexico is even more difficult than it was in Chile or Brazil. There's no jobs. It's a hard time to even find housing. So there's in one area, a state in Mexico, where it's been completely shut off to these migrants. And so rumors have started to fly that, hey, Del Rio was open. That border is open. Tijuana was closed. Laredo's closed, but Del Rio's open. So people started flocking to Ciudad Acuña, because in this community of Haitians, everything moves by word of mouth, and it moves by WhatsApp. I've heard rumors. People think the cartels are involved. I've talked to migrants. Everybody tells me the same story. It's word of mouth. The person who goes before you, they tell you what to do, how to pass, what to do. So now all of a sudden we've got 15,000 people under this bridge, most of them Haitian. And now word is starting to spread that Haitians are being deported. So when I went to this dam, what was interesting is there were a number of Haitians who were there, and they were contemplating their fate, contemplating their next move. Should they cross or should they stay? There was one gentleman, Alex. His wife and his child were both inside. He came out in order to get food. When he came out to the Mexico side, that's when he started to hear that the United States was starting to deport people. So when I met him, he was sitting on the dam, on the concrete part on the slope, and he was contemplating. He actually was deciding that he probably will not go back in. I said, you're going to allow your wife and your child to go ahead of you without you? He says, listen, if I go back to Haiti, they're going to kill me. You know, so my wife and my child, they have a better chance if they're deported back to Haiti than for me. So this is the tragedy in all of this, that you have families that are divided, people that are trying to figure out what to do, and they're desperate. Because they've gone through all of these countries, 11 countries through South and Central America, to reach what they're thinking is El Dorado, only to find out, no, the border is not open. There is no TPS. You have been misled by misinformation. And even when they arrive in Haiti, I'm hearing people say that the government signed deportation papers. No, you weren't even allowed to present your asylum claim to the United States, so there are no deportation papers. And as far as the U.S. is concerned, you broke U.S. law because you entered illegally. You know, so there's definitely, I think, on both sides, the Haitian and the U.S., there has to be some sort of an education campaign so people truly understand this process and what it is that they've done.
Well, Jacqueline Charles, I wanted to ask you, first of all, about the role of some of these South American governments. Chile, for example. Chile is not a densely populated country. And how did the government deal with the migrants over the last decade or so, the Haitian migrants when they arrived there? And also, what's been the role of the Mexican government in dealing with the migrants who obviously had to pass a long distance through Mexico from the south to the north to get to the border?
So let's first start with Brazil. After 2010, there were a number of thousands of Haitians who were fleeing through Brazil, and they were dying in the Amazon. And what the Brazilian government did is they started to provide humanitarian visas to Haitians who were coming so that this could stop happening. They were very proactive. And at the same time, Brazil was preparing for the World Cup, and they were also preparing for the Olympics, and they needed to labor. So we saw a lot of Haitians, I don't remember the number, but it was hundreds of thousands of Haitians who went to Brazil. And life was good in Brazil. You're Black. It's predominantly a Black country. They may not have known Portuguese, but they were struggling, but they were surviving, and they were able to send money back home. Then the economy in Brazil turned. We had the whole corruption scandal, and so Haitians said, you know what, let's go to Chile. We can go to Chile, we can work, we can get money. But then when they went to Chile, Chile is not a country that's very receptive to Black, immigrants. Blacks are less than 1% of the population, if that. So Haitians had a hard time, from the weather to the fact that they were staying in these apartments that were the size of closets. They were working 16-hour days, 6 days a week. I mean, when I went to Chile and visited and talked to them, I was there for over a week. It was a very difficult existence. And so they were looking for their next move. And so now we started to see, Haitians started to move out. They were going by foot. They were going by bus. Maybe depending on where they are, they had to fly to it. But this was basically mostly a foot journey that they were doing. And people were dying in the Darien Gap. And what you started to see in countries in South and Central America, they started to close their borders. Even Venezuela, before Haiti changed its allegiance from Venezuela to the United States, Venezuela was a very friendly country to Haiti, right? They were shutting their borders. They were not allowing Haitians to cross through. We've seen Panama, thousands of Haitians who have been stuck in Panama, and even Costa Rica, and we're continuing to see this. And then they ended up in Mexico. And so we're talking around 2016 when you ended up in Mexico, and at this point, we did not have deportations to the United States. When they got to Mexico, all of a sudden you get to a place like Tijuana, doesn't have any Blacks, and all of a sudden you have all of these Haitian migrants all over the place. Central Americans are having a hard time trying to access. And then what happens? The Obama administration shuts down the border, and they resume deportations to Haiti after 6 years of having no deportations because of the 2010 deadly earthquake. So people were now deciding, okay, should I try to risk it or should I stay? They basically decided to stay, most of them, and they started developing a community. The Mexican government responded by also creating some sort of a residency program for Haitians to allow them to remain in Mexico legally. But over the years, that has been rolled back. And so what you have today is that you have Haitians in Mexico, either who have been here since 2016 or people who are newly arriving from these South American countries, and they cannot get work permits, they cannot get jobs. It is a very difficult situation. Their families in the U.S. or elsewhere are the ones having to send money to them. They're staying in hotels where maybe they have, it's $50 U.S. a day. So they are now at a point of desperation, but they don't want to go back to Haiti. For them, this is a country that's unstable. This is a country with the whole gang situation. This is a country that has changed in the 2 years, the 6 years, the 10 years, the 14 years that they have been away. So they take this chance based on these false rumors in an attempt to come to the United States. And so this is the difficulty that you're finding. And one of the questions that has now come up is whether or not, or how much of an effort the Department of Homeland Security is really making to deport people not to Haiti, but back to Brazil or Chile or even Mexico, where some of these migrants actually have legal status. Some of them have legal status in this country, especially Brazil. And if given a choice, they would choose to go back there rather than go to Haiti, not because they don't love their country, but because as difficult as the place was that they left, Brazil, Chile, for them, it's still a much better existence than it was in Haiti. At least they can work, they can help their families. But we are not getting any sort of access to DHS Mayorkas yesterday, secretary, at a press conference, and then we wouldn't get an answer. And that's been the very difficult part of being a journalist on this story, is that immigration in the U.S. is already not very transparent. It's very closed. It happens behind closed doors. But given the magnitude of this, we're not getting access to the camps. We're not getting the questions. We don't know how they're picking and choosing who goes, who stays. What we do know, though, is that thousands and thousands of people will find themselves back in Haiti in the coming days.
Well, I'd like to bring in Guerline Jozef, co-founder and executive director of Haitian Bridge Alliance. Welcome you back to Democracy Now! Your response to what has been happening, the dramatic footage over the weekend of U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback attempting to corral the Haitian migrants with whips back to the Mexican side of the Rio Grande. What's your sense of how this crisis has developed so quickly?
My apologies. That's the reality on the ground. Thank you so much for having me. The picture you see, the horrific reality that we are living right now. And before we even go into more the details, it's the narrative that people are using. I remember seeing one of the elected officials in the area, Ted Cruz, the first video he had saying Haitians are invading our country and they needed to be deported. So the pictures you're seeing with this officer on his horse and literally seem to be whipping the Haitian migrant, the black body, that is not a new picture in America. That is the picture of the system, of the anti-black racism that the system is based upon. As a black woman, as an American woman, as a Haitian woman, I am horrified by that picture. I'm horrified that today in 2021, we as the United States of America are behaving in such a way where we literally do not even consider the humanity of a person, so that the world is watching. And that is the picture they are seeing. The picture they are seeing is of men in horseback whipping black bodies. That is what the world is seeing in America right now. And for them to be deporting young children into Haiti right now, as Jacqueline Charles just described for you, it is unacceptable. We are in utter disbelief of what we are seeing right now. And also wanted to make clear that people understand that those 10,000 Haitians and other migrants who are under the bridge right now did not just come and storm the border. They have been here waiting for a chance to ask for asylum, which, by the way, is the legal thing for them to do. A lot of people end up entering without inspection, but it is not illegal for people to come and ask for asylum. But due to misinformation, as you heard from Jacqueline Charles, people are desperate. And if you tell them if you go here, you might have a chance to get protection. So people are leaving their respective cities, such as Tijuana and other places, coming here because they thought they might finally get protection. They might finally get to a space to call home. They might finally be able to sleep better at night. That is what we are seeing. We are not having an invasion of Haitians at the U.S. Mexico border. We are seeing the consequence of the prior administration completely destroying the asylum system, completely destroying the immigration system with MPP, with the metering, with Title 42, that this administration continues to use as a trap to cage bodies, as we are seeing right now, black bodies, and deport them to the very danger they have fled.
And just to be clear, Title 42 is the pandemic title that Trump invoked, but President Biden is enforcing to say you can deport people during a pandemic for, quote, public health reasons. A judge just ruled that that is illegal, but the Biden administration is appealing that. Your response, Jacqueline, your response to that, Guerline?
Everything that we are seeing right now, within the community, within the movement, are completely baffled as to why the judge just told the administration it is illegal for them to continue the use of Title 42. Yet the administration, instead of doing the right thing, is actually fighting, right, against really providing protection for the people. That is why we must push back. We are tired, we are exhausted, but we are here. We are here to let the migrants, the asylum seekers know that they are not alone. We will continue to fight for them. We will continue to advocate for them because their lives matter.
I wanted to...
The black boy, the black man that is being whipped by this officer, his life matter. So we must continue to fight. We are asking and urging the Biden administration to immediately stop all deportations to Haiti in view of what what's happening. The world is watching America.
I want to ask Jacqueline Charles about the latest news on the assassination of the Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse. Your recent Miami Herald article is headlined, "Grenade-Dropping Drones, a Paranoid President, Guards Who Ran, Latest on Haiti Assassination." In it, you write, the night Moïse was shot was actually the second time in a span of weeks his life was in danger, according to testimony from one of the Colombians in custody, one of the Haitian Americans as well. 2 weeks earlier, a plan to arrest Moïse using a bogus arrest warrant upon his return from a trip to Turkey was thwarted when a signal to act was never given. That's according to Janer Alberto Carmona Flores, an ex-Colombian soldier now in custody. He told this to police. Another plan to employ disgruntled masked Haitian police officers known as Phantom 509 to grab the president was also aborted, according to people involved. And you write, according to this report, what is Phantom 509? Who is Joseph Felix Badio? And what role may he have played in the assassination of President Moïse? Is there a warrant for his arrest?
So Phantom 509 is a disgruntled part inside the police. Some of them are active, some of them are former. A number of them have been arrested and recently. But earlier this year, some of your viewers may recall, we saw the police in Haiti protesting, taking on the streets, blowing up cars, letting out prisoners. And what you have is inside the police is this low morale, people just feeling that, they're working as police officers, they cannot survive. And we've been watching this implosion of a police force in Haiti that the United States government actually, supports financially. The UN has trained, but, and has rebuilt, but we've seen it just crumble in front of us. And one of the things that I found in my investigation when I was, looking at these reports and talking to people is that it appears is that low morale, that disgruntledness inside the Haitian National Police found its way also into the presidential security apparatus. According to his wife, there should have been 30 to 50 police officers assigned to President Jovenel Moïse. But on the night in question, the 7th of July, there were 7 police officers that were assigned, one of whom disappeared at 4 p.m. and did not come back until after the assassination. This, according to testimony. This particular gentleman is actually a leader, a team leader. So you had 6 officers that were there on the ground. And what was interesting is that all of these officers who were interviewed, whether they have been taken into custody for lack of action or for alleged involvement, or they have not been arrested, but they provide additional information, they told police investigators that under no circumstances that they were allowed in President Jovenel Moïse's house. So could you imagine, you are part of the protection of a president, think Secret Service in the United States, and that they are not allowed in the private residence of President Biden. This is what was happening here. So on the night in question, none of these guys and girls attempted to go inside the president's house where there was an evacuation plan. There was a back door. So for 30 to 45 minutes, President Jovenel Moïse is hearing drones dropping grenades. He's hearing automatic gunfire. He's calling the phone frantically. Come save me. My life is in danger. Send reinforcements. Nobody showed up. By the time, a high-ranking officer actually came, the president was dead. His wife was seriously injured. And these, soldiers who insisted they were not there to kill the president, they had nothing to do with it. They were there to arrest him and to help to install the new president. It's the story that they're telling, along with two Haitian Americans who said they were translators. But there was this sort of firefight that was going on. Baggio is a former government functionary. He's been in the Ministry of Immigration. He was a consultant until May, when he was fired for quote-unquote ethical breaches. He worked in the Ministry of the Anti-Corruption Government Unit. This is a guy who's well known in Haiti's political circles. I mean, in terms of people in power. President Moïse knew him. I heard that he, at one point, Baggio was even on a short list for a job in the government in Moïse's administration. So he is described by police in this report as, quote unquote, one of the brains of this operation. He has told people that he...
Jacqueline, if I could interrupt, yes. We only have about a minute left, but I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the leaked report, there have been over 40 people taken into custody, but no indication of this in this report of who actually was the mastermind of this assassination.
Exactly. So police just tell you, they're still saying that it was Sano, who's a Haitian American doctor and pastor, that he's one of the masterminds, or Baggio is one of the brains. But the report still does not tell us, who finances. What we have found at the Miami Herald in our independent investigation is the people in custody did not have the financial means to finance this. And so this is the job of the investigative judge who now has the case. He has to continue the probe. And that's the question, whether or not, with the assistance of the FBI, HSI from the U.S., whether or not we will be able to find out who truly financed this very expensive and expansive operation to kill a president.
But Jacqueline, now the prosecutor was going to charge the prime minister, Ariel Henry, and so he fired the prosecutor and the justice minister.
No. The prosecutor was fired when he did this, and under legal experts in Haiti, the prosecutor was out of his jurisdiction. Once a case has gone to an investigative judge, a prosecutor cannot mount a parallel investigation. And I think what we saw, this was an example in terms of how this case is starting to become politicized. You have judges who are in hiding, who have fled, clerks who have fled, who are part of the initial investigation. And this is a concern in terms of whether or not they will allow this process to work the way it's supposed to work in a country that already has issues with its judiciary. So the prosecutor, based on the letter that we got from the prime minister's office and when it was dated, he was already fired when he did this. But legal experts said even if he was not fired, he had no legal jurisdiction to try to mount a separate investigation against the prime minister based on the fact that police says there were 2 phone calls from Baggio more than 3 hours after the president was killed. And Baggio was in conversations with a number of other politicians. There was one call that we saw on there where he was in constant communication with somebody over 200 times. He was even in conversations with his girlfriend the night up, and his apartment is right there in the same neighborhood as the president. But we haven't heard anything about these other individuals. But what you did hear about is a fire prosecutor trying to go after the current prime minister on this.